The Dolphins offense is heating up, and Tyreek Hill, maybe, just maybe, will have his first huge fantasy day since week 1. We dig into and debate our wide receiver and tight end rankings for week 12 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're here for you every day, Monday through Friday, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, every Thursday we get into our wide receiver and tight end rankings. We already went through our running back and quarterback rankings. If you missed those were on yesterday's Wednesday's show. So go listen after this episode. But we have a lot to talk about today with these wide receivers. Even with 6 teams on bye, there are still a lot of good plays. There are some tough guys to rank, so let's dig into it. And I think right at the bat here, Tyreek Hill has been extremely hard to rank, but you have him as your wide receiver 2 this week against the Patriots, only behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, who you have number 1.
Yeah, I think this has been a slow build back to Tyreek Hill of what we saw in 2023. They're just trying to get everything kind of coordinated in this offense. I kind of saw some glimpses of that offense. They've had to adjust because Jalen Waddle hasn't been all that good. Jonnu Smith seems to be the number 2 guy all of a sudden in this offense. They've had to adjust because people are taking away the deep ball, right? I mean, that's what you're going to do against the Dolphins. And Tyreek has adjusted in terms of being a better red zone threat, which he's always been a good touchdown scorer, but his game has been a little bit different. But last week we also saw a lot of downfield stuff that the Patriots gave up to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So Hill's going to be really tough cover for the secondary. He's just too fast, I think, and they're going to unlock him a little bit more. They just have to stop force-feeding the ball to Waddle. Like, he just doesn't need the ball as much when Hill and Smith can do the damage here and Devin Achane out of the backfield. So I think they'll try to get Hill stretching the field a little bit. They need to do that. They have an upcoming game against the Packers that's pretty big on Thanksgiving to help their playoff chances. They don't want to look ahead to that one, but I think they need to take care of business here. And I think Tyreek is the quickest way to do that.
Listen, he should have a good game. It's a great matchup. Like you just brought up how the Rams wide receivers ate up on them. I am at wide receiver 12. I do like him though this week. There are just some guys I feel a little bit better about. But he should have a big week. And honestly, wide receiver 12 would be his best finish since week 1. So I do also think he has a nice game. Some other guys at the top here that are no questions, right? Nico Collins, Justin Jefferson, even Puka and Cooper Kupp with hard matchups. You're throwing them in because they get all the volume. Terry McLaurin, of course, especially against that Cowboys defense. George Pickens has been up and down in fantasy points with Russell Wilson. He's getting the targets. He's getting the production. Now the fantasy points really come down to that, that touchdown or not, which the Steelers are struggling to get into the end zone. They play tonight on Thursday Night Football against the Browns. You have him as your wide receiver 4 this week, Vinny. You're even higher on him than I am. Have him at wide receiver 8.
If I could draw up an ideal matchup for George Pickens, this would be the game.
Yeah.
The Browns really struggle with the deep ball. They give up one almost every week. If you watch their secondary, and now their secondary is beat up. Denzel Ward might grind through it. I'm not sure exactly his status, but he was hurt last week. He hasn't been all that good covering the deep ball anyway if he's out there. They're pretty thin on defense as well. They're trying to be kind of like we saw with the Falcons last week. They were just kind of trying to find bodies to fill all the sub packages and cover enough guys, right? And we saw what happened to the Falcons when that happened to them against the Broncos. Everyone basically went off at wide receiver. So really, there's a clear separation, right? I mean, it's George Pickens, an occasional look at Mike Williams. We're not seeing a lot of Calvin Austin. If anyone would be the second, as we thought, it's Pat Freiermuth, but it could be a big drop-off, right, from Pickens to Freiermuth. And it's actually a good matchup for him as well because they're kind of just a bad pass defense overall because they're not getting pressure on the quarterback, and that allows you to sit there as well and throw those intermediate to deep shots. So that's why I love George Pickens this week, because I think he has that opportunity. When I rank these guys that high, it's mainly because I think they have a shot at scoring 2 touchdowns. And
Ooh.
that's why I have all these guys, because I mean, I think St. Brown could do it. I think Hill could do it. Jefferson can always do it, right? So that's where I'm going with these guys with Pickens. I don't think it gets better than this for a matchup.
And also, it was nice to see last week that it doesn't just depend on the big plays, right? You got 12 last week, 89 yards. So he wasn't like getting these like huge receptions. He was getting 8 receptions, 89 yards. He was actually just used as a wide receiver 1 type, as he should be. So, yeah, I love him this week. Now we got to talk about another guy that's getting targeted like crazy on his team. It's rookie Malik Nabers. Now he does have to play with Tommy DeVito. But I'm here to say, like, I have full confidence in starting him this week and expecting a top 10 performance from him. I have him at wide receiver 9. You have him at 10. So it looks like we agree. We know the Buccaneers are giving up a ton of points. Like, these are the wide receivers that are putting up points against them since week 6. It's not these like amazing guys. It's Drake London, Darnell Mooney twice, DeAndre Hopkins, Rashad Bateman, Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, Bub Means. Like, they all had really good fantasy days. And Tommy DeVito, he supported some good fantasy performances from Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, even Jalen Hyatt had a 100+ yard game when he started. I think it'll be okay, even with Tommy DeVito back there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Daniel Jones, we were concerned about Neighbors with Daniel Jones. He got the job done. It was just a combination of a couple things. Daniel Jones play regressing, and then Malik Neighbors had to deal with that concussion absence. He missed the kind of the rhythm and flow of what he was doing, right? And now they should come back and feature him a little bit more down the stretch. And I really think these rookies, him, Theo Johnson, Tyrone Tracy Jr., they want to see what these guys can do, because, again, they're going to find a new quarterback next year. This is the established weaponry, right? Their offensive line has actually improved as well. So when you look at that, they want to see what they have in these guys. And Neighbors, anyway, should be targeted. He's a security blanket. He's the number 1 receiver who's going to get open. So when you have a backup such as DeVito, he tends to overfeed the top guy, and that's really good for Neighbors going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Neighbors is just such a special talent that you don't have to worry about the quarterback too much, and he already wasn't scoring touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
So maybe DeVito also doesn't support him in that area, but it can't get much worse. Mike Evans, we both have as a top 12 guy this week. If he's back on the field, he's back into your lineups, right? So just keep an eye on his injury status before Sunday when they play. But one guy I want to talk about who's not in either of our top 12, and I want to see, do you think we're disrespecting him? It's Juwan Jennings of the 49ers. Now, we both have him as a very good play. I have him at wide receiver 14. You have him at 17. But, like, anytime he gets to be the starter for this 49ers team, he balls out, has had 11 targets in each of the last 2 weeks, at least 90 receiving yards in each of the last 2 weeks, scored a touchdown last week. Like, he's a really good player, and this matchup is not one you have to shy from the Packers.
Yeah, and George Kittle says he'll be back this week, but really what's happened is Jennings has been the go-to wide receiver of late. It's not just Brandon Ayuk being down, but Debo, as we've talked about, has faded. And we keep maybe having faith in Debo, but he's plummeted all the way beyond wide receiver 3 territory, Michelle. Like, he's not even playable there. He's a wide receiver 4, but we keep playing him probably because of the name, right? It's Debo, his past and all that. It's very hard in fantasy football to just accept that name player who's been a great fantasy player in the past is kind of not good anymore. And Debo's kind of slowed down. I think he's had a tough year mentally, right? There's something just off about him mentally and physically. And I don't know if this leads the 49ers to try to move on from him, because they paid Ayuk. They paid Jennings, by the way. That's how much they value Jennings. So when you look at Jennings, look, the matchup is great against the Packers. They can scheme him open all over the field. Purdy has great chemistry with him. So I think there's a lot of Kittle, a lot of Jennings this week in the passing game, and this could even be worse for Debo.
It really could. I didn't know what to do with Debo. He's ranked in my lower 20s. That might even still be too high for him because, like you mentioned, like, he's not even a top 36 wide receiver as of late. I mean, last week he finishes at 61. A few weeks ago it was 36. Before that, 103. Before that, 75, 42. Like, it's been bad for Debo. So if you're playing him because you know the big play potential he can have after the catch, and he can get that long touchdown, but it's a boom or bust play for sure. We have a lot more to get to with our wide receiver rankings. Let's take a quick break, then we'll finish those up, as well as get into our tight end rankings for week 12. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotel and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Point Guys and Bankrate. Earn points now by joining. You just have to go to joinbilt.com, joinbilt.com/lockedon NFL. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Again, that's joinbilt.com/lockedon NFL to start earning points with your rent payments today.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the number one sportsbook in America for a reason, and it's a good time to get in on the NFL action. Not only do we have a very exciting Week 12 kicking off with the Steelers and Browns, but Thanksgiving is coming up, so you're going to get a lot of action there. And you need to get some action in while you're watching games on Turkey Day and seeing something with your relatives, and you just want to get in on the action. Well, the best place to do that is with FanDuel, and because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com, visit and join today. You'll get started again with a $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more as FanDuel, an official sportsbook sponsor of the NFL. All right, Michelle, let's dive into some of our deeper wide receiver rankings. They're beyond top 15-ish. So let's talk about Zay Flowers. We really thought he was going to do some damage last week, and it just didn't really happen. So I don't know. It's been a couple quiet games for Flowers. I don't know. I think I can trust him a little bit more, however, in this Chargers matchup, because I think they're going to make sure they get him the ball and get him involved. And we saw with the Chargers and Bengals last week, this Chargers-Ravens game could be very high scoring.
Yeah, it should be, right? The Chargers defense looked so good against the lower, offenses, but the Bengals had no trouble putting up points against them. And I don't expect the Ravens will either. Like, yeah, they got stifled by the Steelers. It's not going to be the same thing against this Chargers game. And Justin Herbert's come out of a shell. Like, he's going to put up points on the other side. So Zay Flowers has a good chance to get a good amount of targets. We know when he sees the targets, he can get those 100+ yards. He scored 3 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks. It's just the receiving yards haven't been there the last 2 weeks. I still like him this week. We both have him at wide receiver 13. He definitely has some risk to him, but he's a good play. Devonta Smith, though, on the other hand, we know he doesn't have a super high ceiling, right? He doesn't typically put up a 100-yard game. He's not going to score multiple touchdowns. His ceiling's kind of 75 yards and a touchdown, which you'll take. Mm-hmm. But these last 2 weeks, 14 yards, 29 yards, 0 touchdowns. Will he bounce back against the Rams? I have him slightly bouncing back at wide receiver 21. You're a little bit more bullish on him, though, at wide receiver 15.
Yeah, this is another name that we've liked for a long time, and he was hot in kind of that part of the season where Jalen Hurts was getting revved up in the Kellen Moore offense, kind of maybe the second quarter of the season. But it's been quiet here of late, and partly because the Eagles have been smashing some teams. They've been running the ball. They've struggled a little bit to pass the ball, and you've seen a lot of Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley take over some games. Now, I think the biggest thing is, will the Rams double team A.J. Brown? You'd figure they would. You have Brown as the number one receiver on the board, so that should tell the Rams hey, cover this guy, maybe double team him. Because when he gets double teamed, you could look to Dallas Goedert, right? But there's not much upside there. It is actually a good matchup. The Rams are kind of weak against the tight end as well, but they want to stretch the field and go deep here. And I think they realize that's missing a little bit. The Rams defense has been playing well, so they need to kind of back them off a little bit and say, hey, we got to stretch the field, open things up for other things, our running game. Because I think, again, Brown, there's always half a chance the team is going to double team him and take their chances with Smith and make Jalen Hurts make those long balls to Smith to be effective. So I think this will be a good, smart scheme there from the Rams, and I think that will help Smith. I'm not saying goes off, and really depends on that touchdown, right? If he jumps to where I have him or where Michelle has got him in the rankings this week.
That is true. It does come down to that touchdown. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr., we basically have Devonta Smith and Harrison Jr. swapped in our rankings. So
Yeah.
I have Harrison at my wide receiver 16. You have him at 21. I really like him this week, and I like the matchup. Now, I will say I've had the reverse jinx on Marvin Harrison. Anytime I think he's going to do bad, he does well. So hopefully I'm not jinxing him now, thinking he's going to do good and does bad. But I like that they just had the bye, right? I think
Yeah.
that's huge for any rookie to get really fully acclimate. Oh my goodness. I'm like, what am I trying to say here? Fully into,
Acclimated.
thank you so much. Fully into the offense. I'm gonna just avoid that word altogether. But he's been performing a little bit better. 20 fantasy points in week 8. He had 14 fantasy points in week 10. He's starting to score some touchdowns. Kyler Murray's coming along, and the Seahawks are allowing a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers. Just like since week 7, Demarcus Robinson, Juwan Jennings, Cooper Kupp, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and Drake London all scored at least 15 points against them. And the Seahawks had a bye in there, a bye in week 10. So like they're just giving away fantasy points to wide receivers.
Yeah, and you saw Jennings go off on the Seahawks last week. They're beatable. I'm hoping this game really is a fiesta for fantasy. Just a lot of running successfully for Kenneth Walker and James Conner to pick him. It's a high scoring total here, so should be back and forth, hopefully, and we don't have too much weather. Come on, don't get too messy with us in Seattle. I know it's going to be ugly tonight, so keep that in mind. I don't think it affects things too much with who you might be playing tonight, but that game, we want it to be good weather again because there's so many weapons on the field. And sometimes if the field is bad, then the receiver has the advantage because the defensive backs slip and all that. So that could maybe help Harrison. And again, the Seahawks secondary has been up and down all year. They have some players, but they're inconsistent all over the board. They're actually better in the slot, so that's good for Harrison as well to be on the outside. So I expect him to be good. I just don't know if he can be spectacular this week.
Yeah, I mean, well, you never know with Marvin Harrison Jr. It's been a very rocky rookie season with only a couple really good games in there. Quentin Johnston, we got to talk about him. We both have him top 25 play this week against the Ravens. I will say Johnson has 6 receiving touchdowns this season. Only Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're the only wide receivers with more receiving touchdowns than Quentin Johnston this season, which is just crazy. But we're just seeing him score week after week after week. And in this Ravens game, there's no reason he doesn't score again, right? The Ravens have allowed the most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this year. He's probably going to get that big play. It might be his only big play of the game, or maybe his only play of the game, his only catch of the game. But he's going to come down with probably a 40-yard touchdown in this game.
Yeah, and we're kind of seeing where the Chargers' weaponry is, right? Josh Palmer flashes a little bit, but really this passing game is about 3 folks because they don't really throw to J.K. Dobbins all that much. It's really about 3 guys. It's Quentin Johnston, it's Ladd McConkey, and he's coming on strong, had a big 100-yard game last week. And Will Dissly at tight end has become an important part of what they're doing now going forward. He's had some games in a row. The Ravens have given it up to all these positions, inside slot, tight end, big play touchdown guys, right? They've given it up all around to all these passing weapons. So it's lining up well again. I'm hoping this game also goes off. I'm hoping for a lot of shootouts. I think I do that every week because that's great for fantasy, and I don't care about defensive struggles here. But I really legitimately think the Harbaugh brothers, they're going to try to one-up each other. There's going to be a lot of offense and fireworks in this one. So I'm comfortable playing all 3 Chargers weapons and feeling good about it.
You know what? I think I am as well. I do think I feel best about Quentin Johnston's upside among the
Yeah,
three. But
absolutely.
yeah, I feel good about all three of them. We'll get to Will Disley in our tight end section. Now, there's two wide receivers on the same team on a really bad offense, but they have a nice matchup, and that's Calvin Ridley and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Did they say that right?
Yeah, you did.
Nice. Nice. I'm proud
You
of
don't need
myself.
to acclimatize to that name, so you've acclimated to his name. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. They get the Texans this week, and we know Westbrook-Ikhine has. I mean, it's insane what he's doing, right? Touchdown after
Yeah,
touchdown after touchdown. He's scored a touchdown in 5 of the last 6 games. He's also, I mean, he's playing on 94% of the Titans' offensive snaps since they traded away DeAndre Hopkins. We saw him bring that. It was the 117 yards last week. Now, most of it was on that long receiving touchdown, but the Texans are a great matchup for wide receivers with the Ravens. Those are the two teams allowing the most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this year. 7 different wide receivers has put up at least 17 fantasy points against the Texans over the last 5 weeks. I think you can play both Ridley and Westbrook this week.
yeah, definitely, because there's a couple other factors. The Texans really swallow up the run. The Titans haven't been running the ball well with Tony Pollard of late, and now they won't have Tajay Spears most likely once again. So they're not going to have a lot of options to run the ball in this game. Plus, the game script should be negative. I mean, the Titans should be trailing in this game rather early, so there's going to be a lot of garbage volume to be had. So this is a time of year where the bad teams get a lot of garbage points in the second half, just throwing, where they don't care about guys doing it. I mentioned that last week. Remember with Brian Thomas Jr.? It's like they didn't care. The line just, okay, here's another 20-yard play. Here's another 15-yard play. They were so far ahead, and the Texans could really smash the Titans this week. And really, when you look at Brian Callahan, I think that's what he wants to do, throw the ball a lot. And this game is conducive to that. And what I like is at least Will Levis has got some kind of connection with Ridley and Westbrook-Ikhine, where we can see that production, where he's not terrible, right? Levis doesn't just kind of fall into a shell and can't produce. He keeps throwing. He's relentless, and that's good for those receivers in garbage time.
Yeah. Now we like him more as like flex plays or wide receiver 3 plays, but
Absolutely,
I do both are good, solid plays in those roles this week in that matchup. All right, we have to transition to tight ends now. We got some easy matchups for these guys that you're like, okay, let's plug them in. We feel good about it, but these rankings tend to die off quickly at the tight end position. So we're going to help you try to figure it out with 6 teams on bye this week to close out our positional rankings right after we take a quick break. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you like, or was that lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. I'll tell you right now, my online therapist helped me so much when getting back into fantasy football and starting my fantasy football career. And that's the entire reason I'm here today, because it gave me the confidence to actually jump into this thing and feel good about it. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you don't have to stress about that part because you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNFL today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Give online therapy a try and get on your way to being your best self. Travis Kelce let us down last week for sure, right? He's been on absolute fire. He's been getting a gazillion targets and putting up so many fantasy points. But then last week against the Bills game, he gets 4 targets, 2 receptions, 8 receiving yards for 1.8 fantasy point. I will say, I think he completely comes back to life this week against the Panthers, and he gives us another huge game. And he finishes as the tight end 1 on the week, or tight end 2, I should say. I do have Kittle as tight end 1 if he ends up playing, which he says he will. So I have Kittle at 2. You have Kittle at 1. He's going to bounce right back. Did I say Kittle? Kelce at 1.
Yeah, both of them will, because Kittle didn't play, so he can only go up from there as well. But Kelce barely outscored him. He played against the Bills, so that's not good. But this week, yeah, this is the best matchup again. And it's always good when a team loses to a tough opponent on the road that they go and get a get-well game immediately, right? Get it out of your system. Travis Kelce can destroy this Panthers team who gives up the most points to tight ends. So it all lines up again. It's kind of like the George Pickens perfect storm against the Browns. This will be the second such matchup of the week. So really disappointing if Kelce doesn't go off. Again, if you told me a Chiefs tight end was going to score twice last week against the Bills, I would have, yeah, that's exciting. So really, they did throw to the tight end. It was just Noah Gray. I don't think the Panthers have any kind of game plan like the Bills do to stop Travis Kelce. So I do love Kelce this week. Hopefully he scores and can put together a 100-yard game with that.
Yeah, and to be fair, almost all defenses go into the game saying we need to stop Travis Kelce, right? But
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to do. The Bills just had the right people and coaches and scheme to do it. The Panthers do not, allowing the second most points to tight ends this year. Only the Raiders have allowed more, and Travis Kelce put up 25 fantasy points against the Raiders in week 8. So, yeah, Kelce all the way. Again, Kittle, great play. He says he's going to be out there. You play him. Brock Bowers is getting 1 million targets a game. You play them. Now, after those three guys, because we do both have those three as our top 3 tight ends in the week, I then have K. Dotton at number 4. You have Sam Laporta at number 4. We're kind of switched on these two guys because your boy K. Dotton, you're putting him all the way down at 9 this week, while I have Laporta at 9. So we're the exact opposite on them. Dotton's just getting way too many targets. I know before their bye, it was disappointing against the 49ers for K. Dotton, but the 49ers have Fred Warner, who's just really good at shutting down tight ends. I know technically the Giants have been good against tight ends, but I don't really trust them. I don't think they're a good defense.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason their numbers are not good against a tight end, I'll say this also, is that it's been easy to run on them. You can run on them with Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, and you can throw deep on them with Mike Evans. So maybe they don't need the underneath stuff as much. But K. Dotton is a field stretching tight end, so I could see that. But I adjusted him a little bit just based on the numbers, right? Based on what the Giants are not giving up, but whatever the product is, right, how they're getting to that point. So I just dropped him a few spots. He's definitely playable this week. I think you have to play him if you've got him this week. And if you've got maybe some of these other guys, like a Sam Laporta, I would play Laporta over him. However, it looks like he's going to return. The Colts are pretty weak in covering the tight end as well. So the numbers that don't lie as much of this part of the season, running back, the teams that give up points to running back, either rushing or receiving, or the tight end points, because they're all correlated here, and you just suddenly cannot change and kind of adjust to that. So I kind of pay attention a little bit more to the numbers, but I like Laporta a little bit better than Otten this week of 4 spots, obviously. But again, Otten with his bye week, you're probably playing him.
Yeah, you very likely are, unless you just, you have a fantastic tight end. I would say, obviously, I prefer Otten over Laporta since I have them 5 spots different. But Laporta's an okay option this week because of the matchup so good. I am a little bit worried about the shoulder. I'm worried about the usage that we've seen from him all season long. But if you have him, you can play him. Now, Trey McBride, he's going to be in your lineup. That's easy. He's both of our tight end 5s this week. But after that, you have Will Disley at 6 and Pat Freiermuth at 7, which the Will Disley one I can understand because he has a really nice matchup. We saw him have a big week. We know he could be a field stretcher. And I mean, Herbert's been making beautiful passes to him. The Pat Freiermuth, though, one makes no sense to me. I have him all the way down at tight end 19, and that's probably too high for Freiermuth, who, I mean, these are his last 3 weeks: 19 receiving yards, 17 receiving yards, 14 receiving yards. He had that 151-yard performance because he had a 30-yard catch in week 7. But before that, 16 yards, 22 yards. Like, what excites you here? He gets no targets. He gets no receptions. You just have to luck into 1 receiving touchdown just for him to get you 7 points in a game.
Yeah, I just have a feeling they're going to use him a little bit more because the weather is going to be bad. And the other thing is the Browns are pretty vulnerable against the tight end. It wasn't just the Taysom Hill numbers last week, right? They're just not very good, and they're banged up in that spot. And again, I think you'll have some deep shots to George Pickens. That's probably going to open up the rest of the field here for Freiermuth. I could see him easily scoring this week. So this is, again, my logic on putting him that high. Again, I said I put guys higher if I feel like their touchdown chances are pretty high. I feel like they're extremely high in this game based on the weather, based on the Browns being decent against the run, maybe a little bit of play action from Wilson, a little touchdown to Pat Freiermuth on a flip pass or something like that. I see that happening this week. So I'll give you how I look at the numbers. I'm going to say like 4 catches, 30 yards, 35 yards, and a score. That's going to come from Pat Freiermuth tonight, and that's probably good enough to push you into the top 10 at tight end.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I have zero desire to play him. I would actually, these next 3 guys we're going to chat about, I'd probably go with all 3 over him. And that's Jatavian Sanders going up against the Chiefs, the rookie for the Panthers. I just think they're going to get bulldozed by the Chiefs. They're going to have to pass a lot. And Sanders has been on the field a ton over the last 2 games, putting up, he had a touchdown in week 10, put up 87 receiving yards in week 9. So I like his matchup and how much he's on the field. Tucker Kraft against the 49ers. Don't love that at all, but at least he has a little bit more success in fantasy than Freiermuth. And then Jonnu Smith against the Patriots. He's been involved. He's on the field. Rank those 3 guys for me, Vinnie.
Yeah, I'm definitely going Sanders first. And again, youth movement. Again, Carolina, they're sticking with Bryce Young at quarterback. They're going to see what Xavier Legette can do. They're going to see what Sanders does. Again, garbage time, they're going to allow all kinds of tight ends receptions, and the Chiefs are not good at covering that position. I can't play Tucker Kraft this week. He's kind of faded in this offense. And again, you mentioned Fred Warner and the matchup there. I think this is going to be a little bit easier to navigate through the wide receivers for Jordan Love this week. So that's where I'm going. And Jonas Smith, again, I'm not excited to play him. I mean, you can beat the Patriots, and he's been involved a lot. I mean, it's really hard to sit a guy who's on his hot streak. So I have him at 13. I have actually back-to-back rookies, Sanders at 11 and Theo Johnson at 12. And I have Tucker Kraft all the way bird at 17. So I have no interest in playing Kraft this week.
Yeah, I don't have much interest in playing Kraft either. Like you mentioned, like the 49ers and Fred Warner, they're just really, really good against tight ends. They haven't allowed a tight end to catch a touchdown since week 5. They've only allowed, tight end, 2 different tight ends to catch 1 touchdown this year. And Kraft has fewer than 35 receiving yards in 4 of his last 5 games. So he really needs that touchdown. Put up a 0 points last week. So it's really hard to trust him. I'd go Sanders and Jonnu Smith over him as well. I might even go Pat Freiermuth over Tucker Kraft. Maybe
I'm gonna text you as soon as he scores.
All right.
And you'll be excited because you like the Steelers.
That will be his one catch of the day for
and you'll probably be like 21-0 Steelers when he catches the ball, and then you're good.
I hope so. But I have a feeling this is a trap game for the Steelers and they're gonna lose. But I'm just a worried fan. That's all. Hopefully that's it. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, go give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. Give us a like on whatever app you're listening to us on, your podcast app. We will be back tomorrow to get into daily fantasy football, to get into our favorite sleepers of the week. Don't miss it. Have a good night. Bye, y'all.